Last speech about Dr. King you will hear tonight in this hour is from a 16-minute speech delivered in Washington on Martin Luther King's birthday in 1983, before this day became a national holiday. This is a speech I have never seen or heard before today. It is a speech that would probably be lost to history were it not for the divine intervention of C-SPAN cameras that once again captured something unique. The man who stepped up to the microphone that somber day in Washington 15 years after Martin Luther King's assassination had never been near a microphone without getting a laugh. The funniest man in the world talked about Martin Luther King that day in a way we had never heard him talk about anything. Richard Pryor was then and remains our greatest comedian. He ignored his written speech that day. He got one small laugh at the beginning when he made a quick joke about himself, and then, speaking to an audience of heroes who had joined Martin Luther King in civil rights protests and paid the price for it, getting beaten by police and arrested and worse, Richard Pryor stood in awe of those heroes and Martin Luther King and said this.
I never rode on a bus in my life and took the abuse that some of you out there took. And I was flying on the plane here from California, and I was reading a book about Dr. King, and there were pictures in the book, and it brought back memories of that time for me. I was too frightened to go down to Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia. I was too scared to sit in the church at night and plan meetings. I was too frightened to be a part of that. But if it wasn't for you people who were down there and did that, believe me, I know in my heart that I wouldn't be here today.
Joining us now is Democratic Congresswoman Nikema Williams of Georgia. She is the chairwoman of the Georgia Democratic Party. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. I've been to Atlanta a lot, but I've never been to Atlanta on Martin Luther King Day, and I suspect this day in Atlanta has stronger feelings than it might have in other places around the country.
Lawrence, well, thank you for sharing that with me tonight. I've never heard that speech either. And also the segment before with the color interview with Dr. King. I was just looking at a tweet from Dr. King's youngest daughter today where she tweeted a color picture of her father and herself. And it's those color pictures that remind us how closely we are linked to Dr. King's legacy, because it wasn't that long ago. While I wasn't alive in Dr. King's lifetime, I am the beneficiary of his legacy and the work that he did. I was listening to Richard Pryor, and he was saying how he didn't have to go through what so many of the leaders went through, but he knows that he would not be where he is today. And Lawrence, I sit here in a seat that was once held by the late Congressman John Lewis in Atlanta, in the cradle of the civil rights movement. I sat in Ebenezer Baptist Church today, and I listened to Dr. King's youngest daughter, Dr. Bernice King, how she talked about the history and the legacy of her father, and how so many leaders in this country they will quote a tweet today and remember Dr. King on the third Monday in January, but the policies that we're enacting in this country could not be more incongruent with the legacy of Dr. King and how much more work we still have to do. So today is always a day since I was a little girl. I grew up in Alabama, and I would watch, my mom would make us all watch the shows on TV and Little Boy King, and it has a different meaning now, teaching this history to my 7-year-old son and sitting here and living in this space, knowing that I not only have the obligation to continue to tell the stories to my son so that he understands, but the policies that I know that I have to continue to work on as a leader in this country, that we're still fighting. Atlanta has the largest racial wealth gap in the country. These are things that Dr. King fought for. And this is what Dr. Bernice King was telling us today. We have to get away from the quotable king and get to the living king. And how do we get out of this convenient space of what feels good and doing the work of the people and the work that isn't always comfortable, but is necessary to truly uplift Dr. King's legacy.
Congresswoman Nikema Williams, thank you very much for joining us on this important day.